Good evening, viewers. Welcome back to my channel Literati. Please like and subscribe to my channel if you find the videos which are uploaded useful for original literary insights. Today I will analyze The Burial of the Dead, that is the first part of the Wasteland. To all those who are listening, I would like to tell you that you can listen to this analysis in continuation of the video which I uploaded and which talks about the decades of the early 20th century, particularly the 1920s, in which The Wasteland was written. The Burial of the Dead is the very first part of this modern day epic, which is in 5 parts. T.S. Eliot, a very condensed poet, a poet who is very concentrated in imagery, very complex, because he deals with complex ideas. The Burial of the Dead opens with lines which are among the most easily recognizable and the most popular, the most well-known lines in English poetry. They have become a part of the modern day sensibility. In fact, they have become a part of the modern day pop culture even. These lines, or rather these words are, April is the cruelest month. It says, April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead ground, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Why the month of April? This is a direct allusion to the Christian faith, the month of Jesus Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. This idea itself is based on a paradox. It is an antithesis. It is the month in which Jesus Christ, the first martyr according to Christianity, was put on the cross. He was crucified and he revived, or he was resurrected once again. This, I would like to emphasize, is the foundation of the thought on which this magnum opus is based. It is a paradox, it is an enigma, it is the antithesis of life, it is an anomaly, and this idea is life in death, and opposed to it, death in life. Life in death, actually, it creates the feeling that something which is dead becomes more meaningful and assumes and achieves and elevates itself into something beautiful, something timeless, something which has an impact on the past, the present, and the future. It is never dead and gone. It is like the tradition on which T.S. Eliot puts so much emphasis in his tradition and individual talent, that great critical essay. As opposed to this idea is the concept that there is death in life, which means that being alive does not necessarily translate into any meaning. Death in life means that one might be alive, one might be breathing, but they are like the living dead. Again, a quotation from T.S. Eliot. Their life is meaningless, their lives are meaningless, they are living in a vacuum, they're grappling with an emptiness, with a despair, which makes their life something worse than dead, because the emotions are dead. So these twin paradoxes are the basis of this line also. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead ground. The grounds are dead, but the possibility of life also, because the lilacs can come out. And memory and desire, these are the twin tormentors Memories stir the dull roots, reviving them, and the spring rain seems to create the desires once again. So it is not dead and gone. There is still life in death, and the people who are actually living are more like living dead, because they are living in a void, they're living in a vacuum. So Jesus Christ, the first Christian martyr, he was crucified and he was also resurrected. This is the very foundation of these opening lines. T.S. Eliot is very deeply influenced by the idea of martyrdom. Martyrdom basically means sacrifice, penance for the purpose of redemption. All great martyrs in Christendom have given up their life, or they have sacrificed themselves. They have gone through purgation, through pain, through suffering to achieve a kind of meaning. He has presented this idea in his Murder in Cathedral. He has presented this idea again in The Cocktail Party. And the Christian martyrs, in their death, they achieve a state of everlasting life. So there is life in death. They achieve a state of bliss. They achieve a state of enlightenment. So April, that month of Jesus Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, is the sublime month. It is cruel in a way, but at the same time it is sublime, because it shows that there is still a possibility of life in the dull roots, which are stirred by memory, the spring rain, which creates the desires once again, and which remind the poet, because you will find in modern poetry, most of the poems are in a great epic. We find numerous voices which come in from the wildernesses, all stating ideas which somehow merge together to create a picture of the modern day wasteland, because the wasteland, as the title signifies, is a presentation of the degeneration and the deterioration and the disintegration of the modern world. Going on, moving forward in this stanza, the poet says that the dried tubers, that is the dullness of life, old age, apathy, indifference, disinterest, which come in invariably and which take away the meaning from life, still can be stirred with some kind of life. And then the memories begin, memories of summers long past. In this stanza, we hear the voice of an old person. It might be a man or it might be a woman. Sometimes it seems like the poet is speaking. Sometimes it speaks like a woman is speaking. And the next lines bring back a beautiful memory of some long past summer, of companionship, of love, of long walks on the beautiful streets, under the beautiful arches, under the graceful columns, the alternating sunlight, the light summer rain, walking together, talking, the conversation which does not seem to stop. There is such a deep communion between them, sitting together, oblivious of the passage of time, drinking coffee, and spending a time which is one of the most meaningful experiences in life. The next line is a quotation in German. Now we must remember that this great epic was written in the aftermath of World War I. It was written in 1922, and though, as I've analyzed in my last lecture, the 1920s were what were known as the swinging 20s, a kind of bohemian attitude and a completely overhauling of the mood and fashion and trends which had gone on before the beginning of the modern age in dressing, in fashion, and taste in music, and generally lifestyle changes. But the wasteland does not share the mood of the swinging 1920s. Rather, it is timeless, but there are constant allusions and the reflection on World War I, which has just happened in the previous decade from 1914 to 1918, and which has left a trauma, a deep impact of horror and large-scale devastation. In World War I, which is also known as the Great War, there were more countries involved, so there were the two groups. The groups of the Allies were Serbia, Russia, France, Britain, Italy, and USA. The group of countries who were opposed to them were Germany, Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. This line here is very significant. In German, it says that I am not Russian at all. I come from Lithuania, a real German. And remember, the two opposing sides of countries at war with each other were Russia and Germany. And actually, this is a reminder or a reflection of the World War I, which has just taken place. And it also points out to the intermingling of people in Europe. Some of them had roots in Russia, they might be German, or it was a kind of racial history which was all intertwined together. And these memories bring the speaker back to the time still further back in childhood of the early youth, of carefree happiness, of high energy, of sledging in the snow, of the free air of the mountains, and also the fact that even in one family there could be Russians and there could be Germans, and in this war they were on the opposite side of warring nations. And this war itself, it creates such divisions which are so senseless. So in between there are these allusions or these references or this consciousness or this awareness of the war which has just taken place, that is World War I, because this epic was written immediately after World War I, not sharing the mood of the euphoria and high spirits and gaiety which were the characteristic of 1920s. But like all great pieces of literature, this epic is timeless, and it seems to project itself in the future and visualize a world which will be devastated once again in a more horrific manner, in a greater tragedy of the World War II, which takes place in 1939. So after this snatch, which says snatch in German, the next lines take the speaker back to a further moment in time in the past, where the Archduke, obviously the setting is aristocratic, it might be in Russia, it might be in Germany, it might be anywhere in Europe, because those were the happy times when these warlike tensions had not taken place. So I'm not Russian, but I am from Lithuania and a real German, though Russia and Germany were on opposite sides in the war. In the last part, it is a reflection on the irony of the situation, of the human situation, of the complete futility of war, when countries go to war with each other and inflict this great disaster upon themselves. The last part of this stanza, and in these lines it says Mary, Mary. So Mary is obviously a woman. In the last part of this stanza, we don't know whether it is Mary speaking or whether it is the voice of the poet, but the last lines of this stanza bring the poet or the reader or the awareness to the present situation, and that is of old age, isolation, a lack of communication, which is the sad reality. Those moments in the past, sledging in the snow, in the mountains, the free mountains, in the lovers meeting, walking and talking for hours, those are in the past. The present is that the voice says that I am alone, I am old. One of the afflictions of old age is insomnia. I cannot sleep at night. So I read most of the night. because sleep does not come easily to old people, a consciousness of old age, and I go south in winter. That is again a statement of the afflictions of old age, of loneliness, that one cannot sleep and one does not have the strength to withstand the bitterness of cold, and so one goes to warmer climates. So in the very first stanza itself, we find that the movement from one kind of image to another is very rapid. The lines open with the immortal words, April is the cruelest month, and it emphasizes the central idea of the poem, that is life in death, and as a paradox, death in life. What is dead is not gone, but it achieves a greater significance, a more beautiful meaning, and everlastingness and immortality in death, while living without feeling anything is like death in life. So the reference to the martyrs, to crucifixion and resurrection, and to the suffering and the sacrifice and the redemption of the martyrs, which gives a deeper meaning to life itself, an idea which is very potent and very important in this first stanza. The central idea, the paradox, the antithesis of life in death and death in life. The second stanza takes us again abruptly to a completely different landscape. These lines are a direct reference, or they are taken, especially the expression Son of Man, from the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the book of Ezekiel, where this term Son of Man occurs many times, especially the book of Ezekiel, which is known as the book of prophecies. It prophesies the time or the future of the Jewish people who will wander all over the world for many centuries till they get their own land. That was modern day Israel, that the promised land, which was on the banks of the Western Bank in Palestine. And as the Old Testament prophesies, or the book of Ezekiel tells it again and again, that that will be the ultimate triumph of the Jewish people who have been cursed to be homeless all down the history. Son of Man seems to have different meanings in different contexts. It refers to Ezekiel. It also refers to Jesus Christ, because the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, which is different from the New Testament, which is the book of the Christian faith, it is full of prophecies about the coming of the Son of Man with glory, the Messiah, we can say, and that is Jesus Christ. It makes these prophecies. Sometimes the Son of Man, the term, it refers to the vulnerability of man, the imperfection. There is also almost an underlining of the fact that man is an imperfect creature, but many times it has an allusion to Ezekiel, the prophet, and in the book of Ezekiel, and also to Jesus Christ. It appears around 107 times in the Old Testament and 93 times in the book of Ezekiel. So the reference is there. But what does this stanza say? This stanza is a very direct description of the modern day world. The poet calls it stony rubbish, a heap of broken images. Again, like I said, that the wasteland is almost like, again, as it refers to the book of prophecies, this also seems like a prophecy on the future of the world, which does come true after the Second World War, or during the Second World War, which began in 1939. It seems that the poet can make a prophecy of what is about to happen. This world will change into stony rubbish, and Son of Man, man who has inflicted this upon himself, is himself to blame. And this is his inheritance, this stony rubbish. this world in which he is like a stranger, this world which is full of broken images, because there is no harmony, there is no center of belief, there is no pattern in his life. He is like a lost creature. He is like damned, like a damned soul, like a cursed creature. He is condemned to live in this world where there is no water. These lines are also emphasized again and again. The cricket, no sound. Even the sound of the cricket is empty. The trees are dead. They give no shelter. There is only the red rock, that image of a suppressed violence. The tone is almost one of warning. There seems to be an ominous note, like the references to the book of prophecies, the book of Ezekiel. So this is also the poet's prophecy on the future of mankind. Come under the shadow of this red rock, and the modern man will try to look for some refuge, some possibility of shelter in vain. His search will be futile. He will find no solace because he is full of terror. The poet says, I will show you fear in a handful of dust, because the world is like an alien place. He is an alien in this world. He is a stranger. He is surrounded by hostility. He does not have any inner strength, because this terror of a spiritual emptiness is something which will make him afraid of even his own shadow. As the poet says, you will see nothing here. Even your shadow is an alien to you. Because you don't have any substance, your shadow will rise to meet you it will be behind you, and shadow will rise at evening to meet you, but it will come more like not a part of your being, not your extended self, but as some kind of a hostile alien. You have nothing. You are a stranger to yourself. You don't know yourself. You only know fear. And you are trapped in this world which is full of emptiness, of stony rubbish, of a heap of broken images, where there is no sound of water. Water is, of course, associated with fertility, with a kind of with life, with possibilities, with fruitfulness, with regeneration, once again. But stones and rocks and dead trees, they cannot regenerate themselves. They are dead, they are gone. There is death in the life which you see around you. It's only death. It is devastation. It is emptiness. It is a ruin. And you, Son of Man, this emphasis on the words Son of Man is ominous. It is like a warning. It is almost like a threat. And this is the terrible condition in which the modern man has found himself, trapped, where the dead tree gives no shelter, there is no shadow. Only the shadow which is present is under the red rock, which seems hostile. The man himself has lost his moorings. Even its shadow is like a threat to it, because the terror is hounded by terror. There is nothing in this world, no water, no sound of cricket to give any relief. And like I said, this quotation from the book of prophecies marks the connection that T.S. Eliot has also kind of made a prophecy of the modern world and the condition in which the modern man will find himself. Almost prophetic, because written in 1922, it seems that T.S. Eliot can almost visualize the future and foresee the future and see what is about to come, or what is the future of mankind. Then in this stanza, a sudden shift of landscape from this dry, arid, lifeless, waterless, shadowless world of dead trees and stony rubbish and heap of broken images. There is a sudden waft of words from an opera, that of Tristan and Isolde, which is a German opera and which recreates the legend of the star-crossed lovers, the medieval and the Celtic legend of Tristan, the knight, and Isolde, his beloved, and their tragic love story. A beautiful musical and very aesthetic and legendary recreation of this beautiful love story. So as a contrast from this dead world where there's death and life, this sudden switch to the sound of the opera and the reminder of the beauty of life is unexpected. It is sudden, but that is the poetic device of T.S. Eliot, that he takes different ideas, different images, different pictures, different places, different concepts, and brings them together. That is a deliberate poetic device. The lines which immediately come after the snatch of those lines from the opera Tristan and Isolde are again one of the most famous images from the Wasteland and one of the most easily recognizable images in modern poetry. And that image is of the hyacinth girl. So in the opening lines of the stanza, the warning and the ominous words and the prophecy of a dry world of broken images and story rubbish now merges into the image of the hyacinth girl who has a bunch of hyacinths in her arms, whose hair is dripping wet, a very tender and almost sensual image of the hyacinth garden. And hyacinth, we know, are flowers which grow where there's a lot of vegetation and there is a lot of moisture and there's a lot of water. So this change is from the arid, dry, waterless, parched earth of the first part of this stanza to the wet garden, the wet flowers, the hyacinth girl with her hair dripping wet, and then overwhelming of senses when the lines say, "My eyes failed, I was neither living nor dead." So this state of limbo, this life and death, these two contrasting ideas, but yet one is incomplete without the other. They always go together. They are inseparable. At the same time, they are a contrast to each other. They are contradictory to each other. So life and death and living and dead, again, both the ideas are present, both the concepts are present in this stanza, because the first part talks about the dead world, the world where there is no shadow, the trees are dead, there is a desert landscape, there is no water, even the sounds of the crickets are empty. And the second part of this stanza, where there is an overwhelming sense of, we can say, a kind of repleteness, a kind of sensuality. The hyacinth girl, whose arms are full of water hyacinths and whose hair is dripping wet, and both of them together too, the man and the woman. Many critics have tried to conjecture who this hyacinth girl might be, or who are the women in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. One possibility is that he was in his early teens, he was infatuated with a girl, and that friendship lasted for almost all his life, and they were very, very close. He wrote so many letters to her, and those letters, as this lady's wishes said were to be opened only 50 years after her death, and now they are being read, and they point out to the deep feeling which T.S. Eliot had for her, and the deep communication between maybe when he talks about the German opera, and he talks about the walk under the colonnades and under the beautiful streets, maybe he is reminded of the time which he has spent with her, because his feelings are very deep for her, which are present in the letters. This woman, she was a young girl when he met her first, and later on they rekindled their friendship, though T.S. Eliot was married to another woman and their marriage was not very happy. And this particular girl, who many critics say may be the Hyacinth girl, because literature is always open to interpretations, and there are so many interpretations which are continuously looking at these great pieces of literature in new light. This lady was Emily Hale, and many critics say that maybe he talks about her when he creates this image of this Hyacinth girl, which is such a tender image, which is like a balm on the bruised feelings, which he has sort of accentuated in the first part of this stanza. So in this stanza we find the total contrast, and also the concepts of living nor dead, life and death, life in death and death in life. The next stanza again brings us to another very famous and easily recognizable images. In T.S. Eliot, we find that these landscapes, these images, they grow, they expand, they sort of merge, they create so many aspects, and one image merges into another image expands into another, and at the same time, if we look carefully enough, we find there are threads of continuity as well. The last line of this stanza, where the first part is of a troubled reality, of a dead world, and the last part is one of a sweet memory, of tenderness, of water hyacinths, as a total contrast to the waterless world in the first part, ends again on a line from that beautiful opera, which says, "Lonely and desolate and wild is the sea," a cry of sorrow, that cry of loneliness. The next stanza brings us to Madame Sosostris, who is a fortune teller who makes prophecies or reads people's fortunes, predicts what is going to happen to them, who performs an elaborate ritual of the tarot cards. Tarot cards are kind of a kind of a belief system. They're very esoteric and medieval, and tarot cards are a pack of cards which have different symbols. They are supposed to signify a hidden meaning, very occult, and people usually, there's no scientific basis for this kind of superstition, but then people do believe in them. And Madame Sosostris, people like her, they exploit the vulnerability and the gullibility, or we can say the desperation of people who are so tired of the uncertainty of their lives, or who are so desperate to find a solution, or who try to cling on to something to give them some kind of hope. They come to these people, but obviously she plays to their weaknesses by assuming a very knowledgeable air. But obviously she's a fake, because in the very next line, T.S. Eliot says that she's not some kind of a mystical figure. She's just an ordinary and a rather sordid person, because she has a bad cold. But though she creates an elaborate ritual and creates an atmosphere of some kind of mystical knowledge and paraphernalia of all this kind of devices or these kinds of ceremonies which go with the occult. Actually, she is just a fake, but in spite of that, people do go to her, and she, with a very self-important air, she takes out the cards and she projects them into some kind of predictions about what is going to happen to whoever is asking to be her to read their future. And so these tarot cards actually exist, and they have this, like I said, they are a part of the occult and generally associated with some kind of medieval wisdom and that world of superstition and myths. So Madame Sosostris looks at the cards, takes them out one by one. Here in this line in bracket, those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, it is a reference to the tempest. So again, all these impressions come crowded together, and then the signs which she reads out or she picks out, one, or they are all of Phoenician sailor and all those things. One is the wheel. The wheel, which is emphasized and which is very significant because the symbol of the wheel is esoteric. It is supposed to have a deep significance, and it is present in many ancient religions. The wheel, because it does not have a beginning or an end. And then she reads the fortune of the client or the customer who's sitting before her. But the last part of this stanza, or the lines, also tell the reader that Madame Sosostris is actually just a clever fake. She's an imposter. She is putting on these airs of knowing something mystical because she is exploiting the gullibility of people, and she is playing the role of a very wise woman who has mystical powers to great effect. But actually she is a very canny businesswoman who is as ordinary and sordid as anyone else. She does not have any supernatural powers at all. In fact, the last words which she says to her departing customer, to her client, is that I will bring the horoscope to Mrs. Equitone myself because I cannot trust anyone else with it, which shows that she is actually a very clever and a very canny businesswoman, and there is nothing mysterious or there's nothing otherworldly about her. Like I said, this stanza comes when the other images of who is the person Mary might be, or the memories of the summer romance or the hyacinth girl, they sort of create different pictures, all merging, expanding, flowing, rotating, coming one after the other, and creating a world of impressions. The last stanza of the Burial of the Dead is very important, or it has a deeper connection with the rest of the parts of the Wasteland, because it provides a thread of continuity. These lines which are repeated again in other parts, like I said, to establish that continuity. So in spite of the chaos, there are underlying connections which make the Wasteland a complete whole. In spite of the chaotic images, in spite of the different concepts, in spite of the changing landscapes, from the desert plain to Hyacinth Girl to Madame Sosostris to the present to the past to the still ancient past to memories and to stirring of desires, there are certain images which recur and which make this great epic, a complete whole. These lines are unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn. Unreal city is a term which occurs again and again. This unreal city might be the city of London. It is any city of the modern world. It depicts a horrific world. It depicts a world which is grey and hazy. It says, under the brown fog of a winter dawn, of an early morning winter dawn, dismal, grey skies, hazy, smoggy, full of fog, and it is peopled by human beings who are grey, nondescript, without any identity. They are faceless, nameless people in a crowd which seems to flow in a stream over the streets. There is no sound except the sound of sighs or deep breath. They are like damned souls in hell. This modern day hell. This is an image which again takes us back to Dante's Divine Comedy and his depiction of the damned souls in Inferno and in Purgatory. That great religious poem. We find a reference to it, or an allusion to it, in the beginning of the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, also written in 1917, where T.S. Eliot had depicted the modern protagonist as someone who was a damned creature. Because to create this reference, the quotation was from Divine Comedy was also given at the beginning of the poem. Now, who these creatures or these people, they move silently in this damned world. And the poet says, I had not thought death had undone so many. Again, the emphasis on death and death having undone so many. That is, this is a picture of death in life. They are alive, they are moving, they are living in the city, they are flowing in a stream of crowd, but they are dead. Their souls are dead, their feelings are dead, they are emotionally empty, they are spiritually in a vacuum. So they are more like dead than alive. Death had undone so many. Death has claimed them already, though they are still living. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes up before his feet, forward up the hill and down King William Street, to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours. And the only sounds which can be heard are not sounds of laughter and chatter and conversation and happiness, but of deep sighs, of sorrowful breath, of silent laments. And they move without looking at each other because they don't have the spiritual strength. They don't have the power of communication. And as they move, the Church of St. Mary Woolnoth in central London chimes the hour of 9, but the word which the poet uses is dead sound, because faith is dead, the sound is dead, the sound from the church bells has lost its meaning. There is total death in life. There is no vitality, no energy, no meaning, no beauty. This is a very powerful depiction of death in life, just as in the first part, the image of life in death is portrayed so eloquently through the image of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ in the month of April, and of the martyrdom which gives or infuses a new life in death, making it more meaningful. But here this part is a very clear example or depiction of death in life. These people are dead. And this depiction of the unreal city, which might be London, it occurs again in the fire sermon in lines 208 and 209, where he goes back to these lines, or using the same lines in an echo almost, because these echoes also create this haunting quality about the modern landscape, the devastated landscape of the modern world. And those lines are: unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter noon. So the passage of time from morn to noon, but it's still the unreal city in the fire sermon. And also in the last part, when this unreal city is repeated again, these words are repeated again, but it is not only London, but the words say Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. Again, the lines are unreal. So the connection is very clear. And again, what is significant is that he mentions Jerusalem, Athens, and Alexandria, all these ancient cities of ancient civilization. Jerusalem in particular, which has such a deep religious significance. They are all unreal. And he depicts what the thunder said, how everything will collapse. Falling towers, the cities, unreal cities. So this unreal city, this depiction of London, it occurs in the Burial of the Dead. It is repeated in the fire sermon, and then finally in the last part, what the thunder said. And these images are of the unreal city are supposed to depict or present the modern day world, particularly the Western civilization, which can be any city in any country in Europe. And the significant lines talk about death in life, how mankind is doomed because they have lost the ability to communicate. Their life has lost any meaning. They are damned souls. They do not see any possibility of resurrection. So they are the living dead. There is death in life. And because they have lost faith, even the sound of the church bells is a dead sound. The emphasis is constantly on dead. Death not only not in the physical sense, because that physical death achieves a greater meaning, a greater sublimity. And the real death, that is, it achieves a more significance, and then those who are living are dead. That what was dead achieves a greater meaning. Then the lines, once more we hear a voice, and the voice seems to come from the past. Someone is addressing another person, calling him, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Malay, that copse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has a sudden frost disturbed its bed? Now, this line, I find these lines or these words are very significant. The voice seems to come from the past. But again, the past and the present and the future seem to all mingle together, merge together. This reference is to a corpse and the Battle of Malay, that is in the ancient past. It is an allusion to World War I also, which has just taken place. The corpse is the image of the death and the violence and the tragedy and the horror of World War I. What were the possibilities of these deaths which took place? The killings, the corpse. Is it possible that it will regenerate itself? Will there be life in death? Or were these deaths senseless, meaningless, hopeless? without any reason, the horror of war. And were these deaths for any reason? Will it regenerate itself? Will there be a new life? Because the voice says, the copse that you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Was that death complete annihilation, or will a new kind of meaning come out of it? Will mankind learn its lesson? Will that death give us a direction? Will the tragedy of the war which man has inflicted upon himself make him understand the futility of it all? So the voice talks about some ancient battle, calling out to someone. Again, the voices are all from the wilderness, without any face, without any name. But the idea is, when the voice says the corpse might be a reference to the deaths. Corpse is obviously a dead body that you planted in a garden. The deaths which took place in World War I, though it refers to some ancient battle, melee, in the ancient civilization. But this present day battle, the corpse which you planted, the deaths which took place, will they have some possibility of regeneration? Will they bloom again? Will there be some new life? Will there be some new lesson? Will there be some new significance, like the deaths of the martyrs has given us the message to mankind? Will this death also give us a message, or was it just empty and fruitless? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Or is that corpse now without any possibility of regenerating into something beautiful? Will that death be futile? Will there be no life in this death, unlike the sacrifice and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ and other Christian martyrs, other great martyrs who in their deaths become more significant and more meaningful, providing solutions and answers. But this death in World War I, or the corpse which was planted, will it yield any results? Obviously not, because the Second World War took place in 1939, and this epic, written in 1922, is filled with that sense of disaster in the aftermath of World War I, and almost a sense of prophecy, or almost a certainty that it might happen again. Like the book of Ezekiel, the Burial of the Dead, we can say, is also a book of prophecies where the poet can visualize the future almost. Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men, or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You hypocrite lecture, mon semblable, mon frere. And oh, keep the dog far hence. It is actually a reference to Webster, the Jacobean tragedy, and it means that the dog, that image of dog being a wild beast, digging up and exposing a hidden crime, is quite obvious that it is an image of horror, because we want to bury the past. That corpse was an evidence of a crime. So apart from it being not possible to regenerate itself in a new kind of life, some meaning, it is also a crime which we want to bury in the past. The last lines in French are from Charles Baudelaire's poem To the Reader. It means, you hypocrite reader, my likeness, my brother. So this voice again comes at the end of this part, adding another dimension to this part of the Wasteland. And like I said, it is full of the central idea, that is, or it is based on the central idea of life in death and death in life, a paradox, contrasting idea, a concept which is an antithesis, but at the same time, which is something which T.S. Eliot emphasizes a lot on. As I said, in his tradition and individual talent also, he has emphasized on the importance of tradition, which is something in the past, as always reinventing itself and finding new meanings and having an impact on everything which comes after it. So the Burial of the Dead, I've seen many lectures where there's a very simplified underlining of some key ideas, but to actually understand the Wasteland, each part has to be read in great detail to analyze the images, to find the central theme which is running through it, to find points of continuity, which I have mentioned the most obvious one, the central theme, of course, as well as the images of the unreal city. And as T.S. Eliot has himself given some reference points, he had created this new kind of poetry, or he had established his poetic traditions, we might say, in his very first collection of poems, Prufrock and Other Observations. And he has brought it to a perfection in The Wasteland, where he has analyzed the modern day civilization, the modern day world, calling it the wasteland, keeping in with the tone of the modern poetry or the modern literature. It seems to be pessimistic in tone, or it is pessimistic in tone. It is very eloquent in creating the disintegration and the depravity of modern humanity and the modern day world. But at the end of this great epic, he also offers a possibility. Once again, it will come from something which is in the past, an ancient system of belief, an ancient system, proving once again his underlying thought that there is life in death. Something meaningful cannot be annihilated. It assumes greater dimensions, deeper meaning, more eloquence, possibilities, solutions, and it also gives a hope to mankind, to future, a belief that there have always been resurrections and regenerations, and that will also happen once again. Thank you.